Hi, I'm Tony from the Marathon Mates. 2024 is done and dusted, and now it's 2025. On this episode, we will be sharing with you some of our training strategies for the year ahead. We've talked already about some of the goals and races that we'll be doing, but today we'll be talking about how we will be training to ensure that we meet those goals for the many races that we do have lined up. We'll share our tips and tricks to maintain motivation and to keep us going forward. Just a word of caution, there has been some Christmas cheer spread in this podcast, so it's going to be a fair bit of fun. So are you ready to run? Let's go.
Welcome to the thrilling world of the Flying Runr, brought to you by the Marathon Mates.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome to episode 79 of the Flying Runr. 2024 has come and gone, and it seems to be like a blink of the eye. But now 2025 has commenced. It's time that we started to look at our training strategies for the year ahead. We know that it can be very daunting having a long list of events. And, I think all the hosts have got a reduced list of events for next year, but it still would seem for many that they are quite long and lengthy. So on this episode, we're going to talk about our training strategies that we use to keep us motivated and hopefully injury-free for the year ahead. But before we do that, as always, I'm joined by my marathon mates. We've got the Christmas cheer corner in Tim and Tara. And of course, we've got Lucia down there. How are we all? And, at the end of the day, following the run sheet, what a year 2024 has been. I can't believe how quick it has actually gone. But let's talk a little bit about what's happened in the last week. How have you been going, Lucia?
Well, running's I had last week off work, which was nice, so I could actually get some extra runs in. So I can't believe I'm actually going to tell this story, but I think considering how this podcast is going to go tonight, I think it's going to be a very fitting story. So what's today? Monday. Yesterday, the aim was to do maybe 10 to 15 in preparation for my 25Ks for 2025 on New Year's Day. So I get to Centennial Park, park the car, which is my aid station as well. I get out one of my favourite pair of Lululemon tights, a big hole in the middle. I'm like, okay, do I go? Do I start the run, or do I go home, get changed? What do I do? So I tried to fold the tights up and kind of fold it over on the hole. That lasted for maybe about 500 meters. And then I thought, hang on, I've got a first aid kit in the car. Surely there's got to be a safety pin in there. And so then I run back to the car, tie it up. I last about 4Ks, and I'm like, no, this isn't ending well. So I called it, and had a coffee at a cafe in the park. And so my 10Ks turned into 4Ks, and those tights are no longer with me. They had to. But it was just like, because I was paranoid. I'm like, just say if the pin gives out and because the hole was like, okay, for our viewers which are listening to this, it was a good 15 centimeters long, the hole.
Wow.
And I only realized when I got out of the car. And I'm like, just say the safety pin gives way and the hole extends. I'm like, it ain't going to be a pretty look. I wouldn't wish that upon my own worst enemy. So I pulled the pin, but all things considered, training's been going well.
You pulled the pin. That's a pun that Tim would have been proud of. So, Lucia, the old wardrobe malfunction. So there's always reasons that we can find to drop some kilometers down or to abort a run. But wardrobe malfunction. That's a good one. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's probably the only valid one I can actually use, because the other times when I've gone to stuff it, I may have stopped at an ice cream truck in the park for an ice cream and gone to stuff it.
Yeah.
But I think the hole in the tights, and a big hole at that, probably the only time it's a valid excuse.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim and Tara, how's your running week been?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say rest in peace to Lucia's tights, because I do understand where she's coming from. Yes, absolutely. I hope you gave them a good burial and not just unceremoniously dumped them in the rubbish bin. I do know where you're coming from on that. I have actually had one of my favourite pair of tights give way on the thigh at about probably maybe 200 metres into a run, and I had to run the rest of the 500 metres. Ended up with a really bad chafing to the point where I've still got scarring from it, and that would have been about 2 years ago. So I can feel your pain. So I'm glad you gave up when you did, because it's not pretty.
You keep running in them when they've got holes, Lucia. I do with my shorts.
It's a little different for females, Tim. Anyway, no park run for you, Lucia, I'm assuming?
No, because what was Saturday?
That was Saturday.
This week always throws me out. No, Run Club.
Right.
Run Club
Tony?
Saturday.
Did you
We're talking about your running at the moment, Tara.
Oh,
Don't try and
okay,
take over the hosting.
I would like to actually give up on Saturday's park run. I did run with a friend, which was very lovely. I ran with a really lovely friend of mine, Juanita. However, we ran at a place called Picnic Point Parklands. Now, that's a mouthful and a half, isn't it? Picnic Point Parklands Park Run at Toowoomba. Now, those of you who have run in Toowoomba will know that Toowoomba has got no flat bits at all to it. And it was very interesting.
It was hilly.
Hot and hilly is the nice way to put it. Even Tim came in at about 7 minutes slower than normal. So
it was hot and hilly, but it was a good course. It was a mixture of concrete path, grass, cross-country type running, and trail running.
Wow.
Up and down hills, 3 laps around. You run past a beautiful waterfall there at Picnic Point Parklands, and a number of ups and downs along the way. But it was a beautiful course. It just was quite hard, and with the heat and humidity, it was very difficult. On top of that, we then backed it up yesterday on Sunday, our long run day, and did a long run yesterday. So I did 21 Ks in the heat and humidity of 97% humidity, 29 degrees, almost 30 degrees. Real feel of about 32 or 33 degrees, I think. And Tara did about 16 kilometres, didn't you?
I did 16.2. I stayed with Tim for about 5 Ks, and then I'm just like, what the hell am I doing? I'm not actually training for a marathon. Why do I have to run today? So I decided I would do walk-run intervals, and I ended up with 16.2 Ks, I think it was. It was all right, but it was very, very hot. First thing we did when we got home was to jump straight into the pool. So, yeah.
Now, on top of that, we also did Christmas Day Park Run at Sandgate Park Run.
Mm-hmm.
And I know this will be released after New Year's, so Happy New Year's to all of our listeners. And we'll be doing Picnic Point Park Run.
We'll be doing Paradise Point.
Paradise Point Park Run, down the Gold Coast on New Year's Day. But, Tony, did you do Park Run on Christmas Day? I know you did.
I did do Park Run Christmas Day. I went down to the local Park Run here in Cleveland in Queensland. It was fun. It was different. It was Tim and Sharon also got out, but they didn't do Park Run. They just went and did their own thing, which was awesome. I then did a 10K effort on Friday morning, and then I did the Wynnum Park Run along the beach there, along the waterfront on the Saturday. So rested on Sunday. We did a 3K walk, and fundamentally a little bit like Tara at the moment. I'm thinking, well, my training for Gold Coast kicks off soon enough, but there's no need for me to be going out and killing myself in the heat that we currently have. And at the moment, we've got our 13K resolution run on New Year's Eve, and at the moment the weather actually looks like it might be either a little bit cooler which I'm very, very grateful for at this stage. I'm very hopeful that goes well. So it's so still running during the Christmas seasonal period, and I think that's always a positive. But let's see, because it's now that time of the week, Tim, what's been happening in the news? Over to you, Tim.
Yep. So Guinness World Records and the Dubai Marathon have teamed up to join forces, I guess, at the Dubai Marathon, which has been held on January 12th. So unfortunately, none of us will be able to make it there this year, but it will be there in future years as well. This partnership between the Guinness World Records and Dubai Marathon will enable marathon runners across all distance categories, not just marathon runners, but all distance categories, to try and achieve a new verified record. It adds a layer of excitement to one of the region's top events in the Middle East. Some of the records you could go for could include things like wearing costumes for humanitarian causes, and we've seen that at London Marathon. Running in a group, with the most runners running in a group. Could be fastest time for dribbling a football or a basketball, fastest time as a blindfolded athlete, running in a youth uniform such as a school or a school teacher or a doctor. Could be running while hula hooping or running with an egg and spoon. And we actually do know somebody who used to be the world record holder for running with both a single egg and spoon and a double egg and spoon.
I was going to say Phil would enjoy that, wouldn't he?
Phil, yep. So he's done that. And it could also be things like fastest times by a mother and daughter, or a father and son as well. So that's on in the 12th of January, and will continue on. So we'll hopefully see lots of world records there. In Dubai, the races include the 4K, the 10K, and the marathon distance. There is no half marathon in Dubai. But, guys, I know you guys like to do some quirky things from time to time, particularly you, Lucia. Could you see yourself running any world records out there? I know we've all been to London and seen all the people in London with all their fancy costumes running for world records. What about you, Lucia?
Funny you should mention it, because last week I had about 4 or 5 different friends send me a video of a race. I'm pretty sure it was in Dubai, where it was where you could have a Krispy Kreme after doing a K. So you'd get to the point and you could either go to the finish line, or if not, you could go for a donut and keep going. So I'd probably do something in terms of like how many chocolate bars can you eat? Like, is it 1 per K? I'd do something quirky like that. I'd probably make myself sick in the process, but I would consider giving something a crack, something that wouldn't be normal as such.
Like a beer mile, but donut mile for every mile for 26 miles.
Yep. Oh God, thinking about it like that is a lot. But I'll give it a crack. Mini donuts.
That's why you'd become the world record holder, I guess. Tony, could you see yourself doing anything weird and wacky?
No.
Oh, Tony, you sound so boring.
And you didn't even have to think about it.
You know, the only thing that's going on in my mind is Dubai, January 12, and the heat that would have. What time do they start the marathon? Does anyone know?
I think it's like 5 o'clock in the morning or something. It's still their winter time, don't forget. So it means it's not 32 degrees, it's 31 degrees.
That's a bonus. No, I could not see myself doing too much there to make the Guinness World Records, but good luck to everyone that has a crack.
Now, just to confirm, the marathon for the elites starts at 7, and then for the marathon masses, elites start at 6, marathon masses at 7, the 10K at 8:15, and the 4K at 10:30.
Wow, there you go. I thought it was an earlier start than that. There you go.
As someone who's been to Dubai, I would not recommend running there at any time of year. It doesn't matter if it's winter or summer. So you would not find me running that race at any time of the year, no matter what incentives came in point with that, because it is hot. I live in Brisbane, where it's 97% humidity and 30 degrees at 4 o'clock in the morning when we started on Sunday. I don't think I could run Dubai. So you can take that one, keep that one. Yep.
All right. Well, that's that one. The next bit of news is Benson Kipruto aims to go faster in Tokyo. So, guys, Tokyo Marathon, as we know, is about 8 weeks away. And last year's male winner and Paris Olympic bronze medalist Benson Kipruto has come out over the last week or so saying that he's aiming to defend his Tokyo title, which is great to hear. He said that he is working around the clock to ensure that he is ready for the challenge. And over the Christmas period, he gave up a lot of Christmas cheer and food and family time because he was deep in training, pushing himself to run faster than ever before. Last year, as we know, he set a new course record in Tokyo, and he's looking to do the same again in 2025, this year. So he is looking to go fast, and he's no stranger to winning. We also know he won in Chicago in 2022. So he is an elite. He is somebody who knows how to win a race, and it is something that he wants to do and go faster again. So it'll be interesting to see what he does in Tokyo, guys. The elite field hasn't been announced yet. It will be interesting to see if Kipchoge does line up. I know Kipchoge does love Tokyo. He's been to Tokyo a number of times and has done really well there in the past, albeit last year was a fail for him in his mindset. He came 10th overall. But it'll be interesting to see who lines up in Tokyo in just under about 8 weeks' time. Any thoughts on that, guys?
I think it's going to be interesting to see who does line up in the elites, because really this year I don't think there's any major world championships. So I think it's going to be a year of who races what, and interestingly, which elites will come to Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It's going to be very interesting. I think we're going to see some. I mean, we always see really good fields, but I think we'll see some stacked fields in the majors this year. So, yeah, good on you, Benson. Another course record awaits, hopefully. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
As we know, Tokyo is a flat course. We've all done it. It is a flattish course. The problem is it's got a lot of turnarounds, 180-degree turnarounds. So, and that's why it doesn't typically get the world records, because there's a number of slow points on the course. So it will be interesting to see if he does set the new course record next year or this year. And it'll be interesting to see how fast he goes. But Lucia, you mentioned Sydney being added into the list of majors. Sydney has got qualifying times. We talked about that last week. We said there was some confusion on the website. There still is confusion on the website, I must admit. Last week I mentioned that they are currently establishing their time qualification process, and more information was coming soon, according to their website. And that was on their frequently asked questions. However, Tony, I believe you found some other information on the website this week.
I think Sydney has confused people here, and because when you were mentioning it last week, it was good. I was thinking to myself, I'm sure I've seen something on this, and I'm sure they actually posted something on socials or something. So straight after our recording, I went looking first up through their socials. I couldn't see anything, and I'm thinking, my God, have I dreamt all this? And then I discovered it, and I saw where you had gone to the frequently asked questions, and I saw that they had coming soon, more or less. But then under their high performance program, they'd listed their qualifying time. So. And I made a comment last week on the podcast that there's only two categories, under 40 and over 40. And so somewhere I must have read this. But anyway, so they do have their qualifying times out. For under 40 male, it's sub 235. So it truly is a high performance program. Under 40 female is sub 255. For the non-binary category, it's a sub 255 as well, and over 40 male is 250, 2 hours and 50 minutes. over 40 female is 3 hours 10, and the same with the non-binary. There is a process that people have to follow. They've got to submit that and provide link to evidence. And in the non-binary category, you must show that the results have been obtained competing in a non-binary division in other races. So those applications close 11:59 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time at on 10th of January 2025. So that's the Sydney High Performance Program.
And just to add further to that, well, by the time this episode drops, the ballot would have closed. So I hope everyone that wanted to enter the ballot didn't wait to the last minute or thought, okay, no, I'll do it on a different day. So it'll be interesting to see, it'll be interesting to see if they're going to release how many people entered the ballot.
Yeah, it'll be interesting because I don't think it's a ballot as such for the high performance stuff. So obviously, this is what they call the high performance program. So it's different than a typical qualifying program. It is interesting when you look at those under 40 times of sub 235 and over 40 times of sub 250. They are really looking for the really fast runners. Yeah. They're not looking for, as other marathons would do, London and New York and others would do, which is break it down into 5-year age gaps and say, these are the times for each of those 5-year age gaps. So I think as I said last week, I think it is a bit, Sydney is trying to find their feet and trying to work out how do they deliver a major and what it looks like. They're trying to have a qualification process, but this is well and truly over the top for a qualification process, and there'd be very few runners who would actually qualify for that.
Yeah, it certainly is. It'd be interesting. Let's do a quick check on how they match back to Boston cutoffs.
Yeah. The other thing is, while you're doing that, Tony, they have said that it is only allocated to 600 spots. So, whereas qualifiers in most other marathons would take up probably 5,000 or 6,000 places, not 600 spots. So
absolutely.
So
for Boston, for example, 2025, 18 to 34, the qualifying time is 3 hours flat. So Sydney's 2:35. So very interesting.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting. And I think most people, as I said, will get in through the ballot, as you said, Lucia, as well. I think the ballot is the way that people will get in. 600 people here will get in via this process. But to be honest, these are running club people that run really fast, that aren't quite elite, but almost elite.
Yeah, they're sub-elite. So,
yeah.
But
that's okay. That's okay. It doesn't affect us. We're already got our entries, so we're all good. All right, and the last bit of news probably doesn't really make much difference to many of our listeners, but for those that do, the GC30, which is one that Tara and I do regularly on the Gold Coast. It's in May every year. It's a great event, and Tara and I have been doing this for the last 5 years or so, and it really does attract a big crowd most years. They've announced some major changes for 2025. So due to some planned revitalisation works, the regular start-finish precinct is going to change and will no longer be staged at the normal location, but instead at the Muriel Henchman Park, which is still on the Gold Coast Spit, but approximately 800 metres from the previous start-finish area. Therefore, there has to be a new course in 2025. The 30K race, which is the one that I normally do, will remain the same, albeit on a slightly adjusted course. However, the 15K course, which is what Tara would normally do or has done...
No, excuse me. I normally do the 30K as well. Last year is the first year I've done the 15K. So Tim has now put me down to the 15K category as a permanent, obviously.
So, there is no more 15K race anymore. So that's been wiped. So you've been wiped. Sorry, Tara. So
I was wiped before this, obviously.
Along with the 30K race, there will be a new half marathon distance, which is probably a better distance for most people, a 10K and a 5K race. So those who have entered into the 15K race, you should have received an email by now advising of the changes. and all 15K runners have now been placed into the half marathon race. If you don't want to run the half marathon, you are entitled to change your entry to whatever distance you would like, including the 30K distance, free of charge. So I think that's a really good outcome. They've accepted that there's going to be some change. They've allowed people to make changes for free. But are you happy with that, Tara?
Yeah, I actually am. Like, I find the 30K in May is just a little bit too far for me sometimes. Like, going back and doing a second lap, I sort of just sit there and just go, what the hell am I thinking? No, really, it's still hot in Brisbane or the Gold Coast at that time of the year. So 21Ks is really where I would like to be running at. That's where I run in my training. So to me, 21Ks is a way better distance than 15Ks. However, there are people that I can understand would be quite upset with that because 15Ks is
their marathon.
It's their marathon.
Yeah.
So it's going to affect certain people in different ways. To me, I'm actually happy to go up that distance, whereas I know of a few people that won't be quite as happy. However, 30Ks for me is way too far at that time of the year if I'm not training for a marathon. So, yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Cool. And
Awesome.
That's the news this week, Tony.
And thanks, Tim, for the news. Now it's time to talk about our training strategies for the year ahead. We all have a number of races planned throughout the year, so I'm going to open this up to each of us to talk about our training approach for the year ahead. Lucia, I'm going to start with you. What does the year look like from a training perspective?
Well, one of my good friends is also a running coach here in Sydney, so she's helping me put a plan together. So for me, the big focus is actually going to be on Gold Coast, just because of the intensity to that. And for me, the bigger focus, what I'm about to say may sound a bit strange to our listeners, but there is a reason behind my madness, which is very surprising for me. My focus for GC is going to be running a fast half, just because of the time between the half and the 10K. Because taking into account, by the time we cross the start line of the half and at my slowest half, it's 3 hours. So, which means I literally maybe only have a couple of minutes to get from the finish back to the start of the 10K. So my focus for GC is actually going to be on the half and to get a fast half, because I know I can do the others, no problem. So so my approach is going to be a little bit different, and I'll go into it more as we get more into the conversation about how I'm going to approach the multi-day one. So I'm going to tackle this training cycle differently. I think I've worked out. I think I'm doing about a 20-week training program, and I'm actually going to have some rest weeks, because I go to in May, I'm going to the Great Ocean Road, but I'm actually not running any races. It's one of my friends, Julie Tarantim. It's her 50th, and she's doing Julie's festival, 50th festival of running or something. So I think there's like 15 of us going, but I've decided I'm not running. So that week's going to be a forced rest week. So I'm actually going to make sure I have rest weeks this time, because the intensity, the number of Ks I'll have to do for this one, which will be very similar to Dopey. So I'm being careful on this one. But as I said, my focus is going to be doing a fast half for GC.
Okay. So from a training perspective, I can't even get my head around what that would look like. So you're fundamentally going into what may look, for all intents and purposes, like a normal marathon training block?
So how I'll do it is kind of very similar as to when I trained for Dopey. So I'll do some of my training runs will be a simulation. So on the Saturday, I'll do 3 different training runs and have a 10-minute break in between the first one and the second one, and then have an hour break between the second and the third. Then on the Sunday, do a longer run to kind of mimic what GC is going to be.
Yeah.
And do it exactly. So planning on probably doing about 4 of those just to see how the body will cope, because I did something very similar when I trained for dopey. I think I did about 4 or 5 what I call the mini dopies, just to
Yeah.
get the body used to running on tired legs, because ultimately that's what it's going to be, is running the body on tired legs. So that's going to be a big part of it as well.
Excellent. Tim and Tara, now a normal week for you, a normal long run, is up around that half marathon distance anyway. So talk me through your training strategy from a broad view of what it looks like for the coming year.
Well, Tim and I are going to have different training strategies for a change, mainly because Tim's doing the full marathon in Brisbane in June.
Yeah, early June.
At Brisbane Marathon. I'm only going to do the half marathon there. Oh, sorry, just the half. No, I'm doing the half marathon. I shouldn't say just the half. I'm doing the half marathon. I'm trying to conserve the body.
Tara, sorry, which one are you doing?
The Brisbane Marathon.
Yeah, no, but the half or the full?
Just the half. Just the half, right? Half.
I'm doing just the marathon.
Yeah, Tim's doing just the marathon.
Sorry, couldn't resist.
I know, understandable.
Well
so
done,
our man, the things I have to put up with these two. Anyway, back to our story. I will be training completely differently to Tim, and that sort of showed over the weekend where I only did the 16Ks and Tim did the half. We're trying to run a little differently this year. I will be doing, I guess the same as you, Lucia, and Tim and I are planning on doing all of Gold Coast together.
Yep.
Okay. Just checking. Apparently, we're doing all of Gold Coast together. So we will have similar training where we do back-to-back. Sunday, we will do a long run as usual, but it will end up being about 30 to 35 Ks. Saturday will be around about 20 to 25 Ks. Some of it will be at speed. We'll do park run at speed, and the rest of it will be at just however we feel like doing it. But up until then, Tim will train probably by himself, I'm assuming. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah, so my strategy is a bit different. So I have to build up to a marathon distance by June, start of June for the Brisbane Marathon. So the way I'm looking at it is I have the Brisbane Marathon in June. I have Gold Coast in the early July, and at the end of August, I have Sydney Marathon. So it's almost one continuous training block for 3 marathons. That's the way it's going to be for me. So the way I want to do it is to build it up gradually. That's why I want to hold it at 21 Ks as my foundation, which is what I'm doing at the moment. Hold it there, gradually build it up, get comfortable running at sort of 30 Ks for numerous weekends in a row. And that's why I want to run the GC30 as part of my training program at 30 Ks, because that sort of maxes out a lot of my training that I do. And then I can head into Brisbane Marathon, treat it almost like a training run for the Brisbane Marathon. And my intent is probably to run the first loop of the half of the marathon there with Tara, around that 2.5 hours mark, and then to run the second loop by myself at about 2 hours to come home around that 4.5 hour mark. And then recover from that fairly quickly to build up some more distance and more training to be able to go into Gold Coast. And we'll talk about Gold Coast shortly around how we back it up. But that's sort of my plan. And then come out of Gold Coast and keep some of that bigger distance in the legs for a couple more weeks until we head into Sydney. 4 or 5 weeks afterwards, 7 weeks afterwards for the Sydney Marathon. So the question I've got, and the problem we've got is, which we're still working out, is what does taper really look like in all of those 3 races? And for me, I don't think there'll be much tapering between any of those races. It'll be just more of a continuation of the same training.
No.
What about you, Tony? What's your strategy?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's we've got a similar thing with Gold Coast. Sydney, and then Amsterdam, and they sort of flow in to each other. Amsterdam's mid-October, Sydney's end of August. So we get that 6 to 7 week break between Gold Coast, Sydney, and then once again for Amsterdam. But initially, once we've rocked into the new year, I'm actually going to have a couple of really slow weeks, just to, I picked up some reading material for in amongst all our Chrissy gifts, and I'm reading a book about the 80-20 training method, 80% easy, 20% higher intensity. So I'm going to do 2 really, really slow weeks, just coming out on to get myself set for the year. Mid-January, I start the block leading into Sydney. I'll be starting the long run block, probably sitting around that 15K mark. I'm comfortable with that. And like Tim, I'm going to hold it for a couple of weeks. So, and my plan for my training is that when I ramp up at distance, I'm going to do it as an easy run. The following week, I'll do it as an effort run. So I can build up and then put some effort into it to see how I'm feeling. The weeks will have a bit of a tempo hit out midweek. I've mapped out some of our running courses locally where I've got a 500-meter stretch that I can hit as a bit of a tempo and then jog it back, and do that to build up a little bit of speed. Sundays are potentially going to be my strength and conditioning day. So we traditionally do our long runs on a Saturday. I don't see that will change. But so bye park run for a while. But we will be, potentially having either Sunday or Monday as rest days. So doing strength and conditioning there. So that's the plan for me, having a 3-week taper coming into Gold Coast, because it is a goal race for me. I do have some targets that I really want to hit, but the key for me is to come in to Gold Coast feeling really good, fit, healthy, and injury-free. After Gold Coast, probably taking a good week off, a good solid week, just to reassess where I'm at. And then I guess I'll be training with Sharon, because we'll probably run Sydney together, and in all likelihood, we'll run Amsterdam together. So the intensity for me will drop, although the way Sharon's going at the moment, the way she's training, the intensity might increase. So because she's on fire. So which is really, really pleasing to see. But so that's the aim. I'm just going to keep load. I'll probably have a week off after Gold Coast. I'll have a lighter week after Sydney, but I'll keep load in the legs so that we can just go through and enjoy the marathons, enjoy the training sessions.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue. You're a bit like us, Tony, where you're going to go back to back to back after Gold Coast, and it's about holding that load rather than. And you're smart. You're not looking to get a PB in every race, right? So
No.
You're looking to hold the load, hold the intensity, give yourself some recovery, but maintain that effort in the body, the distance in the legs. So that you can then get through the next 2 races without injuring yourself and doing damage.
Yeah. Like Lucia, I think I've scheduled in 2 lighter weeks. They're not rest weeks per se, but they're lighter weeks. So I think 1 week, for example, the week before, I'll be running 25K as a long run. Then I'm dropping it down to running a 15K the following week, just to give the body a bit of rest and recovery. So I've really thought about what this training program looks like for Gold Coast, and I'm really, really excited. But given that we've got most of our races so far away, so and with the exclusion of Tim with his 30K at Gold Coast, and then the June marathon, most of us are not hitting our marathons until July. So what is, let's go around the room again about how are you going to keep your training fun during that period of time. We've got a big lengthy period here. We've got 7 months potentially, almost 7 months. So Luch, what's your goal in keeping your training, keeping you energized in your training?
Well, we know I don't take myself too seriously, but I think it's just about having the end goal in mind. And because I do a lot of my training around Centennial Park, and I will admit, if the ice cream truck is there, if I'm halfway through a run, I will stop and I will have an ice cream, because it's not my first rodeo. It's just I have to remember I don't have to prove anything to anyone, because I got my 6-star medal. It's done and dusted. It's time to have fun with it now. So that's going to be my thought process, is to have fun. And sometimes if I have a bad day, or if I get another hole in tights, it's not going to matter if I have to pull the pin early, because it happens. So yeah, so this training block, it's going to be different. I'm going to have fun with it. Like some days, like I'll have friends join me sometimes, or if not, like running down to the Opera House, because no matter how many times I do that road, Tony, when you go down Macquarie Street and you head down to the Opera House, the view never gets old. So I'm quite lucky. Like that is part of my regular training run. So yeah, so I'm not going to take myself too seriously as I did for Boston. So that's how I'm going to work it this year. Sorry,
Awesome.
Yeah,
this year when it comes out, it's this year. Tara, what about you? How are you going to keep training fun?
Yeah, look, I'm the same as Lucia. Look, I've got the half marathon as a race. I think will be my next run, because I would have already done the resolution run, which is 13 Ks on New Year's Eve by the time that this is released. So my next race after that will be the GC half marathon at the 30K or GC 30. And that's in May. Look, I will try and stick around about that half marathon as my training run most Sundays anyway. But I just enjoy my running. If I'm not enjoying it, I'm not doing it. So as long as I'm enjoying it and having fun while doing it, I will keep doing it. And if that means that I take 3 hours and 20 minutes to do half marathon for my training run, that's what I will do. This week proved that to me. I stayed with Tim for 5Ks, and then I'm like, I don't need to run as fast as what I have been training previously. So I'll do some walk run intervals and just talk to people along the way and just have some fun and take photos. That's what my aim is, at least until probably after GC 30. After GC 30, I'll start ramping it up and doing back-to-back runs, and I'll start actually doing some speed work, not just on the treadmill, but also outside. I enjoy my speed work on the treadmill because the treadmill does a lot of the work for me. And I know that sounds really lazy, but I don't have to think when I'm on the treadmill. The treadmill keeps that continuous pace for me. Yes, I'm still doing the work, but it's not as hard because I'm forced to do it. When I have to do it by myself, it's a little harder, obviously. But it's just a case of doing back-to-back runs so that your legs get used to running on tired legs.
And you're fortunate. Where we run, you're always within a few kilometres of running. You always meet somebody along the way. You stop and chat to them. It keeps it fun. They might run with you for a little bit. So there's always some fun anyway when we're doing our long runs. So I don't think you'll have problems staying and keeping the fun in your running. We're fortunate. We know a lot of people out where we run, and it's more of a Sunday meet and greet a lot of the time for you, Tara.
Me talking to people? No. Never.
Yep.
So Tim, you're just going to roll around, have fun down at Sandgate with Tara? Is that the way you're going to keep fun and joy in your running?
For this month, January, yes, I will still cruise through things. Aiming to do a half marathon every weekend. That's my aim. And then by the end of January, I'll then start ramping it up through February, March. As it starts to cool down just a little bit, I'll start to bring some extra distance in there. I'm not worried about pace. I'm not worried about speed too much. It's more just getting distance in the legs for me, getting that marathon distance ready for June. And whilst I'm talking about February starting to ramp up the distance from a half marathon upwards, I take it very easy. As you know, it's 3 kilometers at a time. I hold it at 3. So I'll go from 21, 24, hold 24 for a couple of weeks, probably still be there by the end of February, and then move it up to 27 by the end of March. By the end of March, I'll be at 27 consistently. Then I'll move it up to 30 in April, to be able to then do a couple of 30K runs in April, move into May, do the GC 30. I may even go a couple of kilometres further than that in late May, and then hit Brisbane Marathon in June.
Yeah.
And then go from there. On top of that, at the same time, which we'll talk about shortly, no doubt, is the GC Quaddie and how we train for that, which is a lot of intensity of back-to-back running.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit of it, because we've already shared a couple of, like Luch talked a little bit around her strategy for training. I still cannot get my head around how you actually train for an event where you're going to be running 5, 10, 15, 21, 36K one day and then 42 the next. Like, to me, it just defies any sort of logical sense that I've got in my mind. So that's me very politely saying you guys are stupid and crazy. But how do you train for that? Like, Luch, is there any other tips on what you've already shared?
I think we're quite lucky because we've both done, all 3 of us have done Dopey. And even though Dopey was over 4 days, but when you take into account, so after the 5K in Dopey, I went to one of the theme parks. So I probably added maybe another 10Ks in steps. And then after the 10K, I went to another theme park afterwards as well. So even though Dopey was spread over 4 days, but it just wasn't the race we did. So there was a lot of steps involved as well. So this is just condensing it. But I think for me, it's going to be the timing of, as I mentioned before, the timing of the half and the 10K, but also practicing nutrition as well. Because it's going to be, because at least when you're doing one race, you just focus on the nutrition at the start, well, just for the one race. But it's like, okay, what do you have in between the half and the 10? What do I have time to have, like, or do I have to carb load more, like focus more on the carb loading for the half, and because there's more time in between the 10 and the 5, like, can I have something small to eat then? So that's where it's going to be tweaking it a little bit. But as I mentioned earlier, it's all about getting the body used to running on tired legs.
Yeah,
and
that is the biggest key to it all, and that's what we've always said, Tara. And whether we're doing Dopey or whether we're doing the Gold Coast Double or the Gold Coast Triple, which we did in 2024, or what we're doing this year with the Quaddie, it's all about running on tired legs and getting your body used to keep moving forward when you've got tired legs. So for us, a lot of the training will be intensifying our Saturday running. So doing the 5K park run, yes, but then maybe knocking another 5Ks on after park run.
Probably another 10, to be honest.
Yeah, well, initially a 5Ks to get it up to 10Ks and then building it up to 15Ks. But then on top of that, it's not about then just going home and crashing out and sitting on the couch all day. It's about staying on your feet and moving and getting that step count up. Exactly what Lucia said, getting your step count up, getting your body used to moving and doing 60, 70,000 steps a day, and your body can handle it over that time. And look, we're not running for PBs on a half marathon. We're not running for PBs on the 10K or the 5K. We're running because it's a challenge, and it's a challenge to complete all 4 races. That's all it is. And to be honest, the training is part of the challenge. Is, how do you do the training? It's build it up to 10, 15Ks on the Saturday, doing your long run up to 30, 32Ks, 34Ks on a Sunday, and having 2 days of running on tired legs. But on top of that, it's about maintaining your body as well, doing your massages,
strength work, making sure that you're stretching every day, making sure you're fueling properly and eating the right fuel foods, not eating, foods that are inflammatory and all that sort of stuff as well during the week. And it's about replicating the race day as best you can
You're not going to go out and run a half marathon, a 10K and a 5K, and then back it up the next day for a marathon in your training. But it's replicating similar things where you are moving, stopping, walking for a while, running again, moving, stopping, walking for a while, running again, stopping, walking, stretching, maybe jumping in the pool, and then getting out for a long run the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'll leave that with you guys to do that. I'm sure that we'll be able to share all of that on the podcast. Now, we touched on this as well a little bit. We're all running Gold Coast and we're all backing up for Sydney. So we've got a 7-week time period between Gold Coast and Sydney. And traditionally, I guess the traditional taper is anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks. If you were to run a traditional taper leading into Sydney, you're only looking at a 4-week, potentially a 4-week, potentially even a 3-week if you take a week off after Gold Coast, where you're building or maintaining your base fitness. So just quick thoughts, Luch. What's your thoughts on how you're going to manage that taper process with such a relatively short period of time between the two marathons?
What my plan is, so after GC, is to have a complete rest week, except maybe some cross training and some strength. Then what the plan is from there is to start it at 10K and bring it up. I can't remember if the plan is to either start at 10 or 15 and then increase it to and then increase it 5 weeks each week. So I think bring it up to max 30 about 2 weeks prior, because Sydney, I haven't decided on my strategy for Sydney yet, because ideally I'm hoping, fingers crossed, to hopefully be a pacer again and to be a 7-hour pacer. So if that does happen, my strategy for Sydney will be different. If I'm not a pacer, I'm just going to go out and have fun with it. So I haven't decided on the strategy for Sydney. So that's why my taper is probably only going to be about 2 weeks out.
Tara?
Yeah. Look, we sound very similar to Luch. We've got 2 weeks after Gold Coast. Obviously, our main aim with Gold Coast is not to be injured. So we will run these full races. We don't care about the time or the speed that we do it in. Our aim is to finish them. So then after 2 weeks after Gold Coast, we have got what we always do, which is jetty to jetty. And we always do the 10K race at jetty to jetty. We don't run that well. Sometimes we run it hard, sometimes we run it fast. But this year we will be running it at just as feel. And then 2 weeks after that, I think, is it 2 weeks? We've got the Sunshine Coast half marathon. So that will then be used as a training block for Sydney. So we will immediately, the day after the marathon of the Gold Coast, we will go out and do 10Ks. We don't care if we're tired, sore, or whatever. We get up, we walk 10Ks. It doesn't matter if it's fast, slow, whatever. It will always be a walk. And
that's largely to remove lactic acid out of the legs and keep the legs moving.
Yep. So that's just a given. Continue on with our strength training. As I said, jetty to jetty 2 weeks after. Sunny Coast 2 weeks after that again, which will be the half marathon. Then I think we have 3 weeks until Sydney. So we will try and aim to get it up to about 30 Ks for after the Sunshine Coast half marathon for 2 weeks. And then we will have a taper week or so.
1 week or
1 week or so of taper. Again, everything that we do will be slow. Sydney will be slow. It is just a case of making sure our body can get through what we're doing. We don't care if we do Sydney in 6 hours. We don't care if we do it in 7 hours. We just want to get it done.
Yeah, I don't want to be doing it in 7 hours. Sorry, Lucia.
Yeah, sorry, Lucia. But Boston, I did in 6 hours and 5 minutes, and that was long enough for me. And I was like, yep, that's enough. I don't care if it's 6 hours, but yeah, I just don't want to be injured. So it's just about listening to our body after Gold Coast, listening to our body.
Yeah, and very similar for me. I expect to have a week off after Gold Coast. When I say a week off, there'll be some smaller runs and just some slower runs, but then getting straight back into relatively high numbers, in terms of training. But I'll be doing it with Sharon. So the difference for me is I'll be training by myself to Gold Coast, and then straight after Gold Coast, moving back in training with Sharon, if she'll have me, and which is going to be a lower intensity to what I've been working towards. And I reckon 2 weeks prior to Sydney, we'll have our longest run, and then just taper in from there. So, and then we do be doing something very similar for Amsterdam. So, all righty. So that's our training strategies all locked in. So I'm really excited for the year ahead, and in all seriousness, I cannot wait to get into my training block. I'm really excited about what I'm aiming to achieve this particular year and turning training into reality. I think another good thing, and Tim and Tara do this incredibly well, is having races as part of those training blocks, because it maintains excitement, it maintains momentum, and it keeps you in the race day feel while you can do it. You can go do a 21K down at Sandgate every other week, but doing 21K at Sunshine Coast with a field and a crowd, it's as part of your training block, I think is a really good strategy as well. So we're going to have a fantastic time. Now, before we hand over to Lucia, is it for Lucia? No, it's Tim this week. Sorry. So we're back to normal. So Lucia did a great job, by the way. Before we hand over to Tim for Tim's tip, a quick update on the Fast 7. We had no feedback, none whatsoever, from any listener or viewer around what that 7th question should be. So, yeah.
Thanks for your feedback too, everyone.
Yeah. Zilch.
Do we actually have listeners? Or are we just talking to ourselves?
No, we have listeners.
So at the end of the day, we would really like some feedback, because if we don't, we're just going to run with Lucia's hands up, her question from last week. And just as a reminder for our listeners, the question would be, would you rather have free lifetime race entries or free lifetime shoes? So if you agree that should be the 7th question in the Fast 7 segment, just don't say anything like you did last week. Otherwise, if you think there's a better one out there, let us know, please. So we've got our first guest coming on in a couple of weeks' time, so we'd like to have this question sorted out. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Tim for Tim's tip of the week.
Thanks, Tony. My tip this week is that with any long-term training strategy, it's always about ensuring that you build up a solid base foundation first. And we've talked about this a number of times. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go out there and run 21Ks every week like Tara and I do, but it's about building up a base and keeping your legs strong and your endurance levels up. So whatever that distance might be for you, whether it's 5K, 10K, 15, whatever, it's really important that you build up a base. My tips for building up a base are as follows. One is pace is not that important. My favorite strategy, one of my favorite things that I say to people is distance beats pace, and it's true. It's not important about the pace. It's about what you can achieve in your runs, at least initially anyway. If you want to go faster, yes, pace becomes an issue. But at the moment when you're building up a foundation, it's about distance, not about pace. It does take time. It won't happen overnight to build a foundation up. It takes a lot of time. For Tara and I, we've been running 10 plus years or more, and it's taken us a long time to build up our foundations up into that sort of 21K mark where we can do it comfortably every weekend. So don't expect to go out and run a half marathon every weekend if the most you've ever run is 10Ks, all right? Don't compare your base to others. Just because Tara and I can run a half marathon every weekend doesn't mean everyone else can. It doesn't mean Tony or Lucia can. They probably can, but they just don't want to. But at the same time, it's important that you don't compare yourself. Everyone is different, and please don't compare your base to other people's base. Everyone's base is different, and that's something that you need to establish for yourself. But the important thing is, once you have established your base, it is a lot easier then to train for the bigger races. So it is a lot easier to build your distance up from a base than starting from scratch every time. So some of these people who go out and run and have a 15, 16-week training program, build up to a marathon, and then stop running for 6 months and don't have a base, it's a lot harder for them to start running again and building that distance back up than it is for somebody who's already established a base. So they're my tips this week. Establish a base foundation. Don't compare yourselves to others. Don't focus on pace. Focus on distance. Do it regularly and ensure consistency, and you'll get there in the end. That's my tip.
Great tip. I think I heard the word base so many times during that discussion, Lucia. We should have kept a count, because I reckon that's a Guinness World Record there of how many times you can say the word base.
It's all about the base. There's probably a song we can play there. It's all about the base. All about the base.
I think Tim wants everyone to keep a foundation happening, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
It is important to build a base foundation.
Base foundation. Yep.
Hey, thanks, Tim. We're just about to end. It's been a lot of fun as always. But Tara, what's happening next week?
Well, I won't talk about any bases, if that makes you feel any better. So let me have a look what is actually happening next week. Next week, we're going to talk about running superstitions, whether it's putting on your shoes and socks in a particular order, or ensuring that you have a lucky singlet or a shirt to run in, making sure that you've never stepped on any line marking on the road, or that we have some sort of superstition we all follow. I don't know, but I personally have a few of my own. So on next week's episode, we will talk about some of those superstitions, as well as Tim is just laughing over here. Let's talk about our superstitions, as well as some of the more well-known ones. We will highlight the weird and wacky superstitions that some of the elite runners out there have. And either way, it will be a long episode, or it'll be a very short episode. Sorry, I've got to focus without Tim being beside me. Either way, it will be one not to miss. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
See what I have to put up with. If everyone is listening to this, can you please just watch the video, because you'll understand what I have to put up with every week with this person next to me.
All on the run sheet, Tara.
Yeah. All right. So that ends what has been quite an awesome show, and an awesome year. I mean, let's face it, we have had an amazing year on the podcast. And I've had so much fun talking about what 2025 looks like for us. And as always, just a big thank you for joining. As always, we love recording these podcasts for you. I hope you love them as much as we love recording them. We love hearing your feedback. So, 7th question, Tim's annoying habits with Tara, whatever you want to give us feedback on, let us know. Me going off script, those sorts of things, just let us know. Please like the episode wherever you're listening to it, and leave comments or send us a message. And of course, we've got our email address, happyrunning@flyingrunner.com. And as usual, video of the episodes available on Spotify, YouTube, audios on Apple and Amazon, and every other popular podcast platform out there. Remember, every step forward is a victory. Lace up, hit the road. And we're going to catch you on the very next episode next year on the Flying Runner. Until then, happy running and happy New Year.
Happy running.
Happy running.